You have to tell me, you know.
Oh, I was so scared of my.
I don't
never
tell
got in trouble.
And you just melted into the walls.
He's terrified.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, he was terrified. Plus, I mean, he just.
That sounds horrible.
Intelligence for wood stove like that. She was.
Yeah,
about
it's
3
like
years
so
old.
bright. I
And we were
can't see
Christmas
it.
shopping, they lived in between a whole community, like say, if you were going to here and then going into Boise and you lived in Idaho City, well, we lived in Tacoma, they lived in this little community in the mountains in between. So we drove from Eastern Washington to over there, which was a couple hours, and then went on to Seattle to Christmas shop. And we come back and Tiffany's sitting going,
No,
keeping in mind.
she's going,
No, she was not. And then I looked at her, she never
Serious,
cried,
huh?
and I thought, that's really weird, and I go, what's the matter? And she goes, I burned myself, and I said, what happened? I mean,
Well, the whole
she
back
was
of her hand.
burned, you can still see the scars, burned so bad. His mother's a nursing assistant, they didn't take her to urgent care, they didn't take her to the hospital, this was hours before. I scooped Tiffany up, I scooped Conrad up, and I said, we are going to the hospital now. I mean, they had to tear all that skin off. Oh, and they just sat there and watched TV. I thought, how can you sit and watch TV with a child that's got 3rd-degree burns? And you're sitting, and I mean, she was sitting there going, oh, I felt so bad, but Tiffany never cried. And I knew when she
She's
was,
always
when she
been
was
a tough
crying, I
woman.
thought, there's something really bad. And it had been hours before. Didn't have to be
I had
hours.
those put together into the hospital.
They were a little
and
on
she
the
was
unsafe side, just a little unsafe as parents, just a little. So we didn't leave Tiffany or Taryn too often. And that was the time she pushed Taryn down on the bed and said, I wish you were a little older.
yeah, weird.
Son. That's why we didn't leave the kids there.
That was weird.
Hitting on her grandson. What did she do? I really truly thought that's what she did.
Wow.
What she just say over the board.
I was like 7 or so.
Oh, there's a little kid.
And
Like,
so I asked if I could sleep at the edge of her bed that night or something. She doesn't think she got up for that. And I was like,
for what? She was different too.
I didn't know what she meant. But it was
And if I had ever known she said that, you would have never been up there. I didn't know. I knew it had something to do with the bed. Oh,
weird.
Trevor's going so much for good stories.
Dogs were not comfortable for that.
Not to, right? That's funny. It's actually very.
So you don't have the only weird guns.
No, so you weren't the only one. You weren't the only one. And my mother spanked me when I was 38 and pregnant. So I have a little bit of your reason. My family too.
Tonight's an oversharing.
Let's walk in the
Oh, yeah, this is great.
A little too much information.
It didn't, it was stopped, it didn't come back on until Taryn was pushed on the bed.
Well, we all got to know each other a little better.
Okay, buddy.
He wants his cookie.
Yeah, he ate it, I
Oh, he
gave it
ate
to
the
him.
cookie. Oh, you're
Yeah.
okay now. then.
Yeah, they're good
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Now you gotta earn your second one, yeah, they both have. one.
Oh, that's so funny.
He's so good.
Yeah, he's eating very good, right?
Yeah.
It's being very
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah.
You would understand this.
I did forget to speak Sherbert.
Okay,
That was
just
pretty
a little.
Karen, my mother said, there's one thing
Well,
about boys.
I think
they
we
never
came
talk
over here
much.
for a Bible study.
We did. We did. It wasn't always, it was equal opportunity.
All right, let's jump in. This next little segment of chapter 21, and we'll take it a piece at a time and go from there. Starting at verse 15, not verse 17. Starting at 15. After these days, we got ready and started on our way up to Jerusalem. Some of the disciples from Caesarea also came with us, taking us to Nason of Cyprus, a disciple of long standing with whom we were to lodge. After we arrived in Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After he had greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard it, they began glorifying God, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. And they have been told about you that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Therefore, do this that we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take them and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. And all will know that there is nothing to the things which they have been told about you, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the law." Verse 25 now. "But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided that they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what is strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself along with them, went into the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of purification until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them." Yeah, let's stop right there for a moment. Yeah, I don't know if we'll make it through now. No. So, we left off last week, and, Paul, we did a lot of talking about, should Paul go, should Paul not go, is it the Spirit, is it not the Spirit, what's going on? And we ended last week on verse 14, the will of the Lord be done. That commitment into the Lord's hands and into his sovereign plan and will. We talked about that. I can't remember, did we talk about it either Tuesday or on Sunday about, I think it was Tuesday, about how that surrender is often nerve-wracking. Because when you surrender, sometimes people surrender with the goal in mind that they're going to move the Lord to do what it is that they want him to do. And that's why when they say, "Your will be done as long as it's mine," more or less. And the reality is, you want more?
There were a bunch of Democrats too.
Is this full still?
Yeah.
So it's a true surrender when you say, "Okay, I'm just going to trust you, Lord, for whatever is going to happen." They leave, so he leaves, and he goes on, and we get here, and they arrive in Jerusalem, and it says that some disciples from Caesarea came with them. They took Nason of Cyprus, the disciple long standing with them, with whom we were to lodge. Or they took them to Nason of Cyprus, who was in Jerusalem. We arrived in Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And then the very next day, it says Paul went in to James. Who's James? And what is his position in the church? He's the head of the church in Jerusalem. He's the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. So they go and they see James, and all the elders were present there. And what did they do? And this is the important thing of this little section, I think. Well, there's a few things. But verse 19, what did they do? What was their purpose at this point for going to Jerusalem?
They were showing what they're doing, right?
Exactly. They've been on this journey. It's not like today where you can send a text message, shoot a photo over, put a post on Facebook, and keep everyone kind of in the loop. And actually, if you get out of America, you go into more third world country get-ups where there's not all the cell coverage, you don't have the internet connections. Updates from missionaries are few and far between, and I don't know how many of you have probably heard in main churches missionaries come and they give their update. This is what's happening. This is what we're doing. This is how we're sharing the gospel. This is what your support of us is accomplishing, and it's important. Remember, the church in Jerusalem had laid hands on Paul and sent him out in the first place to minister. So he's out and he's ministering. He's coming back and he's relating every single thing that Paul had done. No, and that's one of the differences you see today. It's what God had done. There's a difference, right? You know, when we do things, when we minister, we can say, "Oh, this is what Ken did. This is what Taryn did. This is what, you know, Joe did." But what did God do? You know, what is so special about it? You know, you can go, "Yeah, I went and I worked the soup kitchen." Okay, that's nice. Now, what did God do with that? How did God use that? You know, and really, it takes a second to process the difference between what you did and what God was doing through you in that, beyond the physical actions that took place. And that's why he's saying he's relating, he's explaining one by one each of the things that God had done among who? The Gentiles. Among the Gentiles. Why would it be important to share with the church in Jerusalem? Who's the church in Jerusalem made up of? For the most part. Jews. Yeah, Jews. So why, and what was the response initially about even going to the Gentiles?
They weren't happy.
They were not happy about it.
They called the Gentiles dogs.
Yeah, these were the dogs. So they had, you know, remember Peter had the vision, Cornelius going and sharing it. That which God made clean, but it is now clean indeed. Then you have Paul being told he needs to go to the Gentiles. And then you have the report go back because they have to dispute about what should the Gentiles be doing and should they have to follow all the law or not. And they had that discussion and they came to the one spirit saying, no, just do, you know, A and B. And now he gets to come back and say, okay, this is the report. This is what God has done in these Gentiles. And I'm sure they're curious. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to be jealous even when they find out about how mightily God is moving in the Gentiles. But what is the response we see in verse 20?
Sounds like it's awesome.
Yeah. When they heard it, they began glorifying God. They began glorifying God. See, this is the difference again. If you give a report and it's, oh, this is what Ken did. Well, what is likely to happen? Yeah, and people will then think really high and lofty, probably of you and what you did, because all you told was all the great things that you did. Wow, what a saint. Wow, what a nice person. But if you say, well, look what God did, all of a sudden you're taking the focus off of you and your actions and you're putting it where it belongs in the first place. If you don't do that, what does God say? If you take all the credit,
Just the reward.
you just got all your reward. Yeah. So he says, let your acts of righteousness be done what? In secret. That way when your Father sees what is done in secret, he will reward you. So, you know, this is, I think, a great example of what Paul's doing here. He's shining the light back on God, and the response to hearing about what God is doing is to glorify God. And I think that's the natural response when someone tells about what God is doing. It should be give glory to God and thank him for it. This gets a little interesting here. So they start glorifying God, and then they say to him, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. So he's saying, look at Jerusalem, look at this church. And they're telling him, these are all Jews. They all believed on Jesus Christ. But they're also zealous for the law. Different. The Gentiles believed on Jesus Christ, but were they zealous for the law?
Nope.
Didn't know.
They didn't know about the law. They didn't care about the law. And the law hadn't been, they had made the decision not to inflict them with the law, you might say, as far as making that standard. And he goes, you see, there's thousands of us here that are Jews. They believe in Jesus, but they're also zealous for the law. They've been told about you that you're teaching all the Jews to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, not to walk according to the customs. Is that true?
No.
Why are they saying this?
Pharisees. To develop. Staying for Judah.
Staying. This is the word amongst the believing Jews, though, in the church. This is how the church in Jerusalem and the church throughout Judea.
Oh, I thought you meant too, the Jews.
No, these are the Jews that actually believe on Jesus, that have heard about what Paul is doing, what they think of Paul, what they're being told that Paul is doing.
False information.
How did that information ever get out there?
I have to take a lot of this. They place that information out there to lift themselves.
Or maybe, they're Jews, right? They have their Jewish circles. Not every one of their contacts is necessarily a believer. Maybe, they went to their little, break bread with their Jewish friends, and they have a conversation, and they go, "Hey, what's the deal with that Paul guy?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What's the deal with that Paul guy?" "Yeah, he's over here. He's doing it." That's what he's doing. And all of a sudden, something just got planted. Now that person goes, and they go to the next person. The next person. And all of a sudden, you've got this whole big rumor mill happening, this whole big story of what Paul is doing. And it's based on truth, right? There was a discussion about, do they need to get circumcised or not? Do they need to follow the law? Do they need to follow the customs? But that pertained to who? That pertained to the Gentiles. It wasn't pertaining to the Jews, that those instructions. So they took something and they basically grabbed it, either they didn't understand it or they twisted it deliberately, and it became a complete mistruth that's circulating amongst them. And this is what everybody's thinking about Paul. Welcome back to Jerusalem. Your name has been trashed while you've been away, and people are making all these assumptions about you that flat are not true.
Oh, they think it could have been, because if he's out preaching among the Gentiles, and he didn't know that there was a Jew out there, right now he's not telling, to uphold the laws of Moses to that one person who knows the laws of Moses, because he doesn't know who's there.
True.
So then this person goes back
Says he's contradicting.
and he says, this is what Paul did. And you could see how it could have happened, but it wasn't what really happened.
Right. That wasn't his intent, basically.
Right.
And
It's kind of like our media today.
yes,
Very little.
exactly
truth,
like the
right?
media today.
Very little. truth.
Here's a little nugget. Now let's just twist it.
Yeah.
And you notice in verse 22, what's their response? They tell him this is what's going on, and they go, "What are we to do? What's to be done about this? Is a problem, Paul." They just got done hearing what's really going on, right? They're giving glory to God. It's all good. It's not like, "Oh, Paul, I wish you hadn't." They're giving glory. And yet they have to tell Paul, it's not everybody knows what you've really done. They're thinking some bad things. What are we going to do about this? These Jews, these thousands that are zealous for the law, they're going to hear that you've come. They're not going to be happy with you. Verse 23, here's the plan, therefore do this. I will tell you, we have 4 men who are under a vow. Take them, purify yourself with them, pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads. Remember the vow, remember Paul going back to the Nazarite vow? That's what they're talking about. These are 4 men that are under the vow. And at the completion of the vow, what does he do? You go to the temple, you shave, and you show yourself to the priest, right? Take them, you purify yourself with them, pay their expenses so they may shave their heads. All will know that there's nothing to the things which they've been told about you. That they'll know, because they're going to say, surely Paul wasn't doing this. He's been acting under a Nazarite vow along with these other 4, because that's the appearance, right? There's nothing to the things they've been told. But the truth is that you yourself also walk orderly and you yourself keep the law. Is that a true statement about Paul? Yeah, Paul was a Jew. He observed the law. He followed the law as a Jew. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, from blood, from what is strangled, and from fornication. So they reaffirm in 25 what we always said about the Gentiles. We hold to that. They are not bound by the customs. They're specifically, explicitly talking about the Jews, that the Jews should follow the laws of Moses, as is their custom. What do you guys think about that? Is that really the case for the Jews?
I'm not talking about the law of Jesus.
How many people truly believe on Jesus? But see, grace is a hard thing to grasp.
Yes.
That's right.
It is.
You know, receiving something with no expectation or at no cost, a free gift that costs nothing, it's hard to grasp. And it's hard to explain even, because we try all the time. It's like grace is completely freely given to you. You do nothing to deserve it, nothing to earn it. And yet the road is narrow, the way few find it,
And faith is difficult.
and faith is dead without works. It does, and it's hard to explain. And the easiest way to explain it is your grace is 100% free. You do nothing to earn it, to deserve it, to be destined to it, to be selected, to be chosen, whatever you want to say. It's not you, it's all him. Now, once grace is bestowed, the sign of receiving that grace is what is the works. It's the evidence. It's not the obligation of the law. It's the fruit of belief. So there's a difference. You're not earning salvation by your works. You're just actually showing that you truly are saved in those works, because that's what a saved person looks like. And if you don't have it, it's not that you can earn it by doing it. You can't fake it. It just means if you don't have it, you're not saved. You don't have the evidence. You know, if you have a fruit tree and there's no fruit, it's not a fruit tree. It's just a tree. It's
Sidetrack just a little bit there,
yeah.
based on what you just said. We were talking
It's Mama.
two Bible studies past about receiving the Holy Spirit. Scripture says the evidence is speaking of God.
Yeah.
Doesn't say that.
That's just it.
It says in that passage that they received the Spirit and they spoke in tongues. It didn't say that they spoke in tongues.
This is
That's one
the
out.
evidence of speaking.
Yes, but
They were
that
known to have had the Holy Spirit.
But just that just means that.
There are other times where the spirit came upon men in the Bible. And they just-
It's true. It's true.
No, but those are valid points, and those are the teachings of the assemblies. That you must have the evidence of the Spirit. Well,
There's other evidence.
what are the evidences of the Spirit? Yeah, love,
Service.
joy, peace, Galatians 5:23, right? These are all evidences as well. If you have, in scripture says, I forget the verse, if these things are in you and they are growing, you have confidence. You know, if you can see it, that's your confidence, that's your hope. That's the scary part of it. And that's what a lot of people, they don't take the time to look at the evidence. They want to just believe they go to heaven. Probably what I'm saying, turn me off.
It sounds like our washer or something.
Actually, I think it's way too hot in there right now. Do you want me to power it off? It might be getting there, you know why?
So good to see.
So wrong.
Cheese the please.
No more.
Yeah,
Nope.
we had dinner.
Turn around. Turn around. Thank you. It's tough. Yeah, you know, it's, and that's the danger. That's the danger of some of the teachings. So, there we go. Of the assemblies is
An
they'll
overemphasis.
they'll emphasize one thing, but they'll de-emphasize all the other things. And it is true. Speaking in tongues, I'm not going to deny tongues wasn't evidence. Speaking in tongues is a gift of the Spirit. I do not subscribe to MacArthur's cessationism.
Yeah, he hates Pentecost.
He does, but he teaches that the gifts of the Spirit were only during the apostolic ministry, and then they ceased. I can't find a single verse in Scripture that says that. That's to me just an excuse of saying, well, I haven't seen it, so it can't be. You know? Yeah, so it's like one of those things of, have you ever seen $10 million?
No, but we know what it is.
Yeah, just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, that it's not there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just taking in the wrong spot. Yeah. So Paul does it. 26, Paul takes them in, next day, purifies himself, goes to the temple, gives the notice, sacrifice, he does it all. Do you think Paul wanted to do that? Paul's done nothing wrong. He just came back, excited to come to Jerusalem to give his report. We've been doing amazing things. God is just incredible. To God be all the glory. They're like, yes, great. Glory to God, and great time. Paul, we got a problem. There's a rumor about you. It's clearly not true. You're going to need to go deal with it, and you're going to have to jump through some hoops to deal with this problem. Even though you shouldn't have to do any of it, you're going to have to go do it. Sound familiar ever in anything in our lives where you know you don't really need to be doing something, but you literally are doing it just to keep the peace?
Well, you have to have a dread too, because he's the temple, but he's not leaving. So, I mean,
That's the point.
So this is the thing saying, good idea.
Yeah.
If this works,
If this works, maybe I'll get out of here alive. Or he's thinking, you want me to go over to the temple? That's where it's gonna happen.
Right.
You know, I don't know which way I'd lean on that, you know, but still, he had to humble himself and do something that he really, Yeah, he had no burden to do. So there was a lot of swallowing his pride. And kind of accepting, admitting guilt when there was nothing guilty to admit. Philippians, one of my favorite verses. Philippians 2, what did Christ do? Did he deserve the cross? Did he do anything to deserve anything? And yet he took it on himself in order to bring peace.
Because we did.
Yeah. Another one. Christ had to squash. Hold it. We're going to get to continue here. Verse 27. I saw. When the 7 days were almost over, the Jews from Asia, on seeing him in the temple, began to stir up all the crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, come to our aid. This is the man who preaches to all men everywhere against our people and the law in this place. And besides, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Then all the city was provoked, and the people rushed together, and taking hold of Paul, they dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. While they were seeking to kill him, a report came up to the commander of the Roman cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. At once he took along some soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander came up and took hold of him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. And he began asking who he was and what he had done. But among the crowd, some were shouting one thing and some another, and when he could not find out the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. When he got to the stairs, he was carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob, for the multitude of the people kept following him, shouting, "Away with him." As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? Then you are not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness?" But Paul said, "I am a Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no insignificant city, and I beg you, allow me to speak to the people." When he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the stairs, motioned to the people with his hand, and when there was a great hush, he spoke to them in the Hebrew dialect, saying,
To be continued.
to be continued.
What a goose.
What a goose. So it's going pretty good. Went into the temple, followed James' instruction, all the elders, knuckleheads, they had no idea what was about to happen. They see him in the temple, and all of a sudden, what do? The same thing they did with Jesus. They stir him up.
Yep.
False. This is the guy. They give the false accusation. He preaches against the people and the law and this place. He's not a Jew at all. He's an apostate. And then this false allegation, he brought Greeks into the temple and defiled the holy place. And then it explains what that means in verse 29. They saw a Gentile, they saw a Greek with him, and they just assumed he was in his traveling car that he had brought him into the temple, which he had not done. Verse 30, all the city was provoked. They rush him, they take hold of him, they drug him out, they shut the doors, and they're going to kill him. They're going to kill him right there and there, right then and there. Nothing wrong. They're just an angry mob. Yeah, it's, there you go.
Exactly.
Sounds like we-
Yeah,
That's exactly it.
well, that's a problem for Rome, right? We've talked before about riots. How does Caesar look on riots? Doesn't like riots at all. And the governor, the governor gets slapped for having a riot. He'll bring in the entire army and level Jerusalem if they have a riot. So, yeah, they get the report that the whole city is just thrown into chaos. They rush down, centurions, soldiers. You know, what's a centurion?
They were the elite.
Yeah, and typically they were commanders of what? I believe it's 100 men that they typically commanded each centurion. Is it 1,000? I think it's 100. Centa.
Century.
Yeah. So when he says he brought along some soldiers and plural centurions, this was no small force that came in to Jerusalem suddenly. And they see, all the people see the soldiers and all entering, and they all stop beating Paul. So Paul is, man, prophecy is coming true right away. You know, in Jerusalem, he's getting beat. Bonds await him. Remember the prophecy? So they take him, they bind him with 2 chains. What have you done? They can't hear anything. It's so crazy. The uproar is, it's a mess. They take him out. Paul interjects, Greek, and they mention this verse 38. You're not the Egyptian who sent Tonga stir up a revolt, led 4,000 men of the assassins into the wilderness. And I have a little note here on this. The historian Josephus records the event in AD 54. The leader disappeared. The tribune jumps to the conclusion that Paul is that Egyptian leader here. So that's a cool thing about when you have secular history books, verifying something very specific in scripture in verse 38 about Paul's response being the Egyptian. And then you learn history records in 54 AD, oh, there was an event that happened and they're assuming that he's the guy.
He's the same. This is
Yeah. I believe so. I'm not going to say that definitively.
Well, it talks about the sky.
Your notes, Tim?
Yeah,
What's it say?
this is question revealed to who wrongly assumed Paul was, the Egyptian was the false prophet. Several years earlier, it comes to drag out the bones. Before he could do so, the resources were attacked and gathered by the groups. Led by Governor Felix, the son of 100 of his followers were killed or captured, he managed to escape. He is assumed to be a returned master by the crowd. Assassins like Sakari. Terrorist group whose Jewish nationalism led to the murder of enough Jews perceived as sympathetic to them. So, this
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole group of Jewish assassins called Sakari. So we have they all committed that suicide. They couldn't get up, but the Romans started to build like a platform to get them up.
See? Straight. Verse 39, Paul leaves out a small detail at first, which he'll bring out later. He just says, I'm a Jew. Yeah, that's the part he's leaving out. And I'm a Jew from Tarsus, a citizen of no insignificant city, Tarsus being, very influential. Let me speak to these people. I think it's interesting also, look at verse 35. They got to the stairs, he had to be carried out by the soldiers. They had to pick him up. They couldn't get through because the mob was so intense. You know, so this is probably worse than when they had to lay hands on Jesus at this point. You know, the riot, at least the level of the riot. You know, the Gospels don't record the riot with Jesus to be this intense. You know, this is just, yeah, this is just total mayhem has let loose. And Paul is going to now talk. What we're going to find in verse 22 or chapter 22 next week. What would you do in those circumstances? Everybody in the city is hating you. They want you dead. You've been arrested. They've carried you out. Yeah. Well, you know, are you itching to turn and address the people?
Well, because they're gonna kill you.
Would you be thinking of sharing the gospel?
Take up leading the city.
James.
But you think it's also weird that, okay, there's a crowd, they're beating this guy, let's arrest that one. You know, wouldn't you arrest the people that are beating the guy?
Yeah.
It's easier to arrest
This
one
is
than
not logical.
No,
He must be a bad person, so let's arrest him.
he's a troublemaker getting beat there.
yeah, get rid of the one and bring the peace back. That was their idea.
They like to everybody do it. Also,
Yeah, right.
just the way that like.
Full of mercy.
They do that eventually.
That's how I fix
You have a little bit of Caesar in you then. There's 60 AD, 66 AD, with the temple,
70 AD.
70, when the temple's destroyed.
70.
Yeah,
That's what the preterists do.
they have enough of those Jews eventually. They go in and they clean it up. But,
It's amazing to me that here they are, the big riot, and then he standing on the stairs motioned to the people with his hand, and there was a great hush.
That is weird. It's like they didn't use in the house or something.
You would think that they're all yelling and yelling, and then all they have to do is this, and they, sure.
That is weird.
Can't hear it when they're yelling.
Yeah, but when there's a mob doesn't listen
They
to
don't even
somebody
hear
speaking.
what he
Yeah.
has to
it.
say.
Have your beating, yeah,
Yeah.
just pick up a rock and, well, he's
Exactly.
still.
So
Finish
why
the
would you
job.
silence the mob? I mean, it really doesn't make good sense. You're right.
Yeah.
Because when people are all stirred up and the adrenaline's flowing and somebody gets up and goes,
And to me,
That's
to
where you get
me,
silence with the
it
students.
showed that that wasn't all, that was the Lord, of the Lord
yeah,
silencing these people.
it had to be, because these people were crazy.
They were ready to kill him there. We got the centurions there.
Crazy, angry.
And just him raising his hand. You know.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Roman, centurion or any of those telling the people to be quiet. It was calm, you know.
Well, he's think back, because he's up on the stairs, never happened.
It seems too weird to me.
you know, I think that's a
Yeah, the
definite
crowd was all
God
stirred
intervention
up.
moment right
Yeah,
there.
he wanted them to hear. Be quiet what he's gonna say before.
Yeah, and what was the word? A hush fell over people? Is that what it said?
Silence. followed.
Now, a great hush.
Or just say great silence. I thought it says.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, mine says a great silence.
A great silence, what?
It says,
Fell over the people?
No, it says motion to the people with
it
this
says
hand.
emotion with his hand.
When there was a great hush.
It says here, great silence. It's supposed to.
That's when he still.
In the Hebrew dialect.
That is interesting.
Yeah, because when people are all stirred up, the adrenaline's not going to be down.
Yeah. What do they do with Stephen?
Kill him.
They listened to him for a little bit, and then eventually what they did? They covered their ears, started screaming, and rushed at him. They had heard enough. And I would think they had heard enough from Paul already.
But they never heard him talk, they just heard the rumors.
Well, that's
It's hearsay.
Well, and but on the next chapter, it says that he began speaking in Hebrew dialect, they became even more silent. quieter, yes.
Oh,
It's because it's hard.
That
You gotta listen really carefully for the inflections.
yeah, they became even more common. Brothers and sisters in my defense, which I know. Willing to listen and get it. Like, whoa, time out.
Time.
That's- All right, let's pray. God, thank you for this night. Thank you for your word, God. Thank you for your servant Paul. God, that he, we've been following him through your word. That he's been following after you and your heart, Lord, no matter what comes against him. Knowing, Lord, that where he was going, he was not going to be welcome. And even knowing those things after relaying all your goodness, he humbled himself to do things, Lord, that he ought not to have had to do. And in response, he was still not received. God, I pray, Lord, that as we go throughout our lives, Lord, walking the narrow way, following after you, Lord, that we would have that same heart, Lord, to do what's right, even in circumstances that are less than desirable, even when all the cards are stacked against us, even when life just is not fair. We would make the choice to follow you and humble ourselves and take small burdens, no matter how severe they may be, in the light of eternity, they're small. That we face here in this earth. God, give us strength, God. Lord, I pray, Lord, that in the adversity during those times when it's hard to stand, that we would still yet stand. That we would first and foremost be Christians, following after you and giving glory to God. God, we love you. That's the blessing on this week. Amen. There's a whole other fresh pot of coffee I just brewed.
It's very interesting.
Drink it up.